Hi, I'm Kris Barney and welcome to All Things Possible. I'm thrilled to have you here with me. This week we're talking about overcoming depression. Depression is a big thing in our world, and many people struggle with depression, with me included. I have had depression. I've had a very deep depression, as well as that I have a tendency to go to depression. And I want to talk to you today about 4 key principles that you can put into your life when you see the onset or you're in a depression. I want you to know these 4 steps. These are easy. They're keys that will help you to overcome depression, and they were the things that really got me out of depression the fastest. So I want to be able to share these with you. First, I want to invite you, if you haven't joined our community, to join our community. Join All Things Possible at allthingspossible.biz and get the free gifts that are there for you. Become part of our community so that you receive our information. We put out a video and a blog once a week, and we put out information, give you tips and tools on healing yourself and raising your personal development and leadership skills and living your best life. So we would love to have you here with us so that you get that information every week. We send out 1 email a week, and we love having you be part of our community. So let's jump into this. Let's talk about depression and overcoming depression. There are lots of ways to treat depression. There's lots of medications, there's lots of therapy, there's lots of energy healing and energy treatments, there's different clearing sessions, there's different things you can do that way. What I want you to know is depression is real. There are so many people that struggle with depression. And if you were to look up numbers, I did not look up numbers, but in the past I've looked up numbers, and they're staggering as to how many people actually suffer with depression. As a child, I grew up with, my father had depression, and he had it so severe it took shock therapy to bring him out of it. I had a father that took medication all the time for this, and we learned what a chemical imbalance in your body meant and how depression could affect you. My father would get to the point that he couldn't do up a belt, he couldn't sign his name, and he couldn't even comb his hair. He would have to be hospitalized and given shock therapy to actually come out of that. Now, he lived a long, happy life, and the whole time I grew up, I always was kind of nervous with medication and thought, I don't really want to do medication. And I could see different tendencies with me. Postpartum came on. There different things happened in my life and my adult life where I felt like I needed to be aware of what really worked for me. The second thing I want to just kind of bring up is that my twin brother had depression, and it was really obvious when we were 33 that he had pretty much what my dad had had. And shortly after a medication change, he took his own life. So my twin brother at 33 committed suicide right after a medication change. I feel like it has a big piece of what was going on for him. Now, I'm the first one to say a lot of things have to be going on for someone to actually take their life. But what I want you to look at was that between these 2 situations, I really had a fear of medication. I had taken medication a couple of different times for being depressed and having some of those things, those symptoms, and yet I never really felt like it did any good. I felt numb and like I wasn't my best self. So it really put me on this journey to change how I dealt with life and to know how to overcome depression, or how to see the signs of when I'm going into depression, of what I need to up in my game to be my best self. So let's talk about it. When you're depressed, the last thing you need is somebody to say, snap out of it. You know, it's a choice. You have to choose out of it. They say, get over it. And they tell you to think positive and have positive thoughts. And for honest situations here, that's the last thing we want to be told, right? The very last thing we want to hear is somebody tell us to snap out of it, get over it, and pretend we're okay. So although that is really things we need to do, we don't want to hear it. When we're in deep depression and life is not working and things are coming at us, and when you're depressed, you can't make decisions. You have a hard time even implementing the things you know to do, but an even harder time of keeping on track of everything and staying on top of stuff. So overwhelm sets in super fast, and then between the depression and the overwhelm, we get into frustration, and then we think all these negative thoughts about ourselves. We do not have that filter to feel like we can actually think positive thoughts about ourselves, right? So that becomes a really big challenge. So let me tell you about my deep depression. It was after my twin brother's suicide. And right after he died, I went into a huge we have to save my dad. We were sure that my dad would really go into a deep depression and struggle through this, and we immediately had medication changes and called doctors. I mean, the day it happened, we were on the phone with the doctor, making sure that he would be safe and that he would be supported and that everything would be okay. Now, I, on the other hand, immediately went into service. I was worried so much about my brother's children and his wife, and I started going down and sleeping over at my sister-in-law's house and helping her. She had a baby that was 1, a son that was 3, and 2 other boys. They were young, and she was really struggling. I started going down and sleeping over, and I would sleep over like 3 times a week. Every other night I would go down and sleep over, help get the kids to bed, help out the kids, do whatever it took to really support her and be there. Now this went on for months. And then we found a suicide group, so we would go have, talk therapy. We actually met with a group that had all gone through losing someone to suicide, and it was a support group that was phenomenal. And we did that. So I was on this track of doing all these positive things and positive behaviors, and we got to a point where I felt like everything was in place. My sister-in-law was very safe at this point, and I had to get back to my real life, right? Get back to my kids and my business and all the stuff that I was having to do, because staying over there meant getting up super early, coming back, sometimes taking my daughter to sleep over with me because she was younger than the boys, wasn't in school, right? But it was time for me to get back to my teenagers and all that was happening for me as well. So I stopped doing this service, and I stopped sleeping over, and I started dwelling in my own problems, right? Getting in my own set of circumstances and really started to go into a pit. This became my biggest, deepest depression. By the time we got here, my brother had died in February. This was summer. The kids were out of school. And by then I had, a teenager. My youngest was 4, but I had the 3 boys really quickly. And so they were, 11 to 14. And they could really help out. Well, it got to the point where I remember one day, and I remember this well. I got up, I went to the doors of my master bedroom, and I opened the doors and called my oldest son over and said, "Did you feed your little sister?" And he said, "Yes, I did." And I said, "Good." And I shut the door and went back to bed. And I remember thinking, that is the worst thing I could be doing. And yet I didn't have the strength to do anything else. I did not have the strength or the courage or the wherewithal to do anything else. I just had given up. And at that point, my kids were seeing this, and they were seeing that I was less engaged and I wasn't as involved. We'd been through some really hard things. We'd been through my son with cancer. We'd been through my husband in a horrific ATV accident. We had built our own house. We lived in a trailer. We'd gone through all these hard challenges. And here I was, so depressed I didn't want to be out of bed. And I remember, going to the office to pretend like I was going to be busy and playing solitaire for hours. And social media wasn't a big presence then, so it wasn't like you could lose yourself in social media. I just lost myself in wasted time. And didn't want to go to anything, didn't want to attend anything, had absolutely no self-esteem or courage at all. And as I watched myself go farther and farther in this hole, I knew I didn't want medication. I knew I didn't want to live this way, but I knew I didn't know how to get out of it. And that is when I started to reflect on what did I do right after my brother died. Because right after he died, it was as painful then as it was 6 months later. He was still gone. But I coped so much better. I didn't have the level of depression. And the number one thing for me was service. I was looking outside of myself at someone else that was struggling really hard and that had it worse than I did. I still had a husband. Yeah, I didn't have my twin brother, but I still had a husband and my kids, and I still had my mentality intact of like, I knew what was going to happen. I knew that the kids would be taken care of. I knew stuff was okay. And when I went outside of myself to help my sister-in-law and to help my father and to be there and to be strong, I was okay. And because I could look at that and know how much of a difference it made, I began to do that in a different way now. I started looking outside of myself for ways I could serve other people, for things that I could do. Because once you start serving someone else, you get outside of yourself and your problems are not as bad as you find out everybody else has problems and they're worse. And I had done this at the hospital when my son had cancer at 9 years old. This was only like 5 years later, well, 4 years later. It wasn't that big of a time difference. And what I can tell you is it was dramatic at how it affected me to go, I need to serve. I need to go be of service and get my focus off of myself. So I started finding ways to serve and ways that I could make a difference for other people. So that even if all I did was got up, got dressed, and went out for the day, that I was able to see life differently from a different perspective. So the number one way to make the biggest difference is to serve. Find a way to do sincere service. When I wrote my book, when I put my book out, it's called The Basics. It's the basic things that you need to do to change your life and to live your life from a different space. To live your life at a level that you love. And one of the first things is service. It's in here. It's because it's one of the biggest things that helped me the most. And I talk about simple service versus sincere service and how that affects you. So that's the first one. The second one is completely diet and exercise. You'll hear this from everywhere. Every doctor, everyone will tell you that diet and exercise are key with depression. What that means is move your body. Move your body no matter what. Go for a walk. Get fresh air. Maybe it's a treadmill. Maybe it's sit-ups. If all you can do is start with sit-ups, start with some sit-ups. But move your body. Be able to find a new way of living a life with good nutrition and some exercise, so some movement. Pick up something that you love. If it's tennis, do tennis. If it's walking, do walking. If you're overweight and you don't have a lot of energy for that, start small and build up. But exercise is key. It helps to get the endorphins going. It helps to get the chemistry in your body working better and functioning better. And that's why I say diet and exercise. You have to drink a lot of water. When we're depressed and we have all these toxins, the worst thing we can do is stop drinking water. We need to up the water so that we can flush it through our system and release all of the negative toxins and all the things that we have going on. And we also need to be able to be filling our body with good nutrition, because when we're depressed and we're not feeling good, a lot of us don't eat, a lot of us overeat. So when you are depressed, see what it is. Are you overeating or are you undereating? So are you eating your emotions or are you starving yourself? See what that is. When my father would go into depression, we could immediately know he would lose like 40 pounds in a month. And we used to say, if our dad's not fat, he's not happy. And that really was true. If he lost weight drastically, we knew there was a depression. We knew he was plummeting, and by the time he'd lost 20 pounds and was still going, we had to get that stopped. There was a big deal right there. So make sure you're aware of that. So the second one is diet and exercise. Make sure you are upping the water. I just keep saying that because that is key. That's a big piece. The third thing that for me was huge as far as powerful is gratitude. Now these are simple things you can do today. These are simple ways to help you to get out of depression, overcome the depression, and I like to say at the early onset, when you see you're in a down mood, when you see you're starting to get frustrated, when you start to see overwhelm creeping in and you can't feel that resiliency, immediately start with gratitude. Immediately pick up your exercise program. Immediately go to serving other people. Find a way to do service and find a way to look outside of yourself, right? So when we go to gratitude, find the good around you. Even if you're in the worst depression ever, do you have a roof over your head? Do you have clothes to wear? Do you have a vehicle? Do you have family? Do you have loved ones? Almost every time we go to this, we think we have it the worst, and when we just for a few minutes look outside of ourselves at other people, we find out everybody has challenges and problems, and usually nobody wants to trade. Now I've put my set of problems in the middle of the room and wanted to trade several times, and no one's taken me up on it. And I have found a few people that were like, ooh, maybe, but I've never wanted to take theirs. So you'll find that as you go outside of yourself and look to other people. So get a gratitude journal, start journaling 5 gratitude things you're grateful for. 5 gratitudes a day. Find 5 things and don't repeat the list. The longer you cannot repeat the list, the bigger your list is. Go back and read it when you're frustrated. Go back and read your gratitude and what you're grateful for. And the 4th thing is what I call an attitude check. When you see your attitude out of alignment or you're in depression and you check your attitude, I want you to look at this as, what could I do? What's happening? What's triggering me? And I need to find out what works. So if you know what's triggering you, then you know how to resolve that. You know, stop the trigger, right? Or if you can find where that point is. For me, when I start to go to overwhelm, I know I'm going to follow with depression. So as soon as overwhelm hits, I need to immediately, change my behaviors and up my game. Now there's several ways for attitude check. You can change your attitude with music. You can change it with a good book. You can listen to a positive audio. You can have self-care. Like there are times when for me, getting my nails done or getting a massage is the best thing I can do. Or go to a movie and just check out for a couple hours with my husband. Find what you need for your attitude check so that when those times arise, that you can have success in not going to depression. Now when you do attitude check because you're already in depression, that is where you need to find the key that works for you. Is it music? Is it a good book? Is it self-care? Is it a walk? A lot of times an attitude check can be the same thing as the exercise. Both of these can be in the same. They can both benefit you the same by doing them, meaning that it can change your attitude and give you the endorphins, because that's what our bodies were made to do. So in this whole thing, I want you to remember one key principle. Life isn't about waiting for the storms to go blow over or waiting for the storm to go away. It's about learning to dance in the rain. It's about learning to do life differently, right? And the only way that you're going to do it differently is if you commit to try something new. And I challenge you to try this. If you're suffering with depression, if you're having a hard time, I want you to, number 1, go to service. Number 2, diet and exercise. Make sure you up that water and you up that movement. Number 3 is gratitude. Find 5 things you're grateful for and write them down every day. And number 4 is go to an attitude check. Find the source. Find what's frustrating you. Find what's happening that you can take control of and identify it. Also identify things that boost your attitude and help you feel better. That's all I have for you today. I'm excited that you're here with me. Again, if you haven't joined our community, join the community right here, allthingspossible.biz with Kris and Bill Barney, and be part of our community. I want you to know that it is possible for you to overcome depression without medication, without therapy, and be able to handle it on your own so that you can navigate that when it sets in again. when you have had depression, you can guarantee that at some point in your life you're going to face it again, or you're going to face pieces of it. So learn how you can cope with your depression, overcome the depression, and put good skills in place. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time here on All Things Possible. Bye-bye.